Welcome to the East Devon area of outstanding natural beauty. Today we will take you to the beautiful coastal village of Beer, then head inland to Blackberry Camp, and finally to the Otter Valley. Along the way we will be joined by our partners with whom we've worked on projects across this landscape. We very much hope that you enjoy your field trip with us today. Thank you.
So we're down at the beach at Beer with its distinctive white cliffs. It's a working beach with fishermen hauling their boats and the usual array of sunseekers. We're outside the Beer Heritage Centre to meet Nora Jaggers, a very active community volunteer, and Kate Ponting from East Devon Estates, the Countryside Learning Officer, to discuss the Bat-Friendly Beer Initiative, which is focused on the bats that hibernate at Beer Quarry and Caves, special area of conservation.
Out of the 17 species in Britain, 12 of them overwinter in the caves, is it? It's one of the biggest hibernaculums in Europe, which is why it's got such special conservation measures in place. So, and that rubs off on the rest of the village, really. Everybody knows that there's bats in the cave.
Places like this, as well as supporting communities all year round, need to really capitalise on what's special about them. And bats are a really special part of Beer, aren't they?
Absolutely,
so the natural heritage is just as important as the cliffs and the beach and the fishing and all of the other things that make Beer so special. I think that the natural history is something that perhaps needs a bit more promotion. So having a project like Bat-Friendly Beer does help with that. I think if local people understand it, then they're more likely to share that and use it as a tool to bring people in and sort of articulate that to the tourists that visit as well.
I think one of the things that I've always been interested in is the sense of place and how people respond to and feel a sense of place, and actually understanding how much the bats rely on our infrastructure, the natural infrastructure, so that how they rely on the hedges, on the hedgerows as their pathways, and understanding that we've made a difference. I think when we started this project started, there was only about 6,000 greater horseshoes.
So although they're threatened, a threatened species, Devon is a good place for bats, but like everywhere, on our island, it's very much man-managed environment. So it looks natural, but it's not. So whether it's farming or development, there are always things that we can do to mitigate that human pressure on habitats and on the species that live there.
And once you've done things for bats, certainly for greater horseshoes, then you've actually created situations which are much kinder for other animals. So dormice, they rely on hedgerows so that they can run along and nest. By encouraging insects, particularly moths and flying insects, you're also supporting bird species and also as well as the actual moths and butterflies.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose as a large landowner, we've done some landscape scale improvements for bats and for other things. But the thing about Bat-Friendly Beer is it's been a collaboration with lots of other organisations and businesses in the village, and also an opportunity to show people that they don't need to have great areas of garden or a hedgerow. They can just make a little bit of difference in a pot outside their front door or a window box or something.
Yeah. So. For that to happen, we've given out umpteen packets of wildflower seeds, some of which you spent ages putting into the packets, but we've given them to the children at the school. We've left them here in the Heritage Centre in the bomb shelter for people to pick up. And in fact, we've had messages from people all over the country saying, "Oh, I picked up some of your wildflower seeds. Hope you don't mind, but we're hoping to encourage some more butterflies in our garden."
And we hope they'll grow because they might have different soil to the soil that we've got here in Beer.
We won't tell them that.
But the other things that we've done, obviously we pulled together all the organisations and businesses in Beer, the school, the Scouts, the Horticultural Society, the Parish Council have been involved. So by working together, we've had our own kind of ideas. We've had events to raise awareness, but we've also gone to village events, things that were already happening in the Beer calendar, haven't we?
Yes.
And just been part of the village, taken part in the regatta and other events in the village, just to kind of raise awareness that way. And so I think that's been a really positive step.
And we had that fantastic day up at the caves.
Definitely. The other thing I think was really special was when so as a group, as a working group, Bat Friendly Beer meet every couple of months, but we had one of our meetings in school, didn't we? So we had the school council, and they came along and they listened to what we had to say. They were part of the meeting, and then they had their own objectives and they made their own kind of pledges for bats, which was really, really important. And I think that really helped them sort of feel part of the community and on a sort of adult level, really. Because they're very much part of that. And
considering it was the primary school, the objectives they came out with were almost identical to the ones we had at the very first meeting, which was interesting, that the youngsters saw things in very much the same way as we had. Yeah,
and they retain their facts so much better than us adults, don't they? So they can
and we've had some superb walks up from the caves where we've had the opportunity to look at how a landowner can change things in a relatively small way. I mean, I probably, Devon, you'll say it was a big way, but actually from looking at it from an outsider's point of view, they were relatively minor changes, like field boundaries, which are going to have a huge impact, or already having a huge impact. So they're little steps, but with a much bigger effect.
So when the Great Horseshoe Bat project started, we very early on decided that because Beer was a project area, that we wanted to work together, and luckily, I suppose, all the pieces were sort of there. So we had you and Beer Village Heritage, we had a couple of very keen parish councillors, and putting that network together of other local businesses, us as a landowner, it was very straightforward.
We're out on Beer Head now with magnificent coastal views and speaking to Rick, who farms this part of the AONB. It's a very important site with the southwest coast path hugging the cliff, with over 160,000 people using it each year. It has a late Iron Age field system and farmstead, an undercliff area which is a special area of conservation, which also forms part of the World Heritage Coast. Rick, this is a magnificent farm you have here with fantastic views, very, very popular with visitors. Have you had any particular problems here with the restrictions over COVID in the last year?
Well, in the last year, especially in the darkest months of the COVID pandemic, we hardly had many people up walking the coastal footpath. It was always felt a bit strange because I'm so used to sort of thousands of people on a weekend walking past, and I felt it was a shame when people are stuck at home that they couldn't come out and see what is along here, because there's so much to see, let alone the sea. You've got the beautiful countryside, the Iron Age forts, the wildlife and the fauna, and I felt in the darkest months, I think it was a shame people weren't allowed to come out, because I think it probably would have done them good.
And when the floodgates were open, no particular problems?
There was a lot of people around, but yeah, like I say, I'm fairly used to it. I've had to sort of move some cows and calves away from the footpath just for health and safety reasons and swap them with sort of younger animals, but it's not a big hardship. People can still come out and see ewes and lambs as they walk along the footpath, and see animals, which I feel is part of the countryside. And no, they haven't been too bad.
Good. So you're part of the East Devon Farmers Group. That's 70 local farmers working in cooperation with each other. What do you feel you get from that group?
Well, originally the group helped me get my countryside stewardship grant. If you're a member of the East Devon Farmers, you got extra points which helped me apply for the countryside stewardship. So that was the original help, and then since then The East Devon Farmers Group will be able to get experts from, say, FWAG or the Bat Conservation to help me farm, so I don't lose money, but I can farm, which helps the environment as well as help the farm be profitable. I felt I've gained a lot. I've put in herbal lathe, which I haven't put the fertilizer on, which has saved me money, but it's also produced flowers and for the insects, and I felt it's helped the different ecology, different species of grass. It's all going to help the area, and it's also very drought resistant, which this is a very dry farm. So I've gained and the environment gained, and that's really all from the East Devon Farmers Group.
The AONB has been increasingly working with farmers like yourselves. I wonder what sort of support you'd hope to get from the AONB in the future.
Well, when you listen to the press, I feel there's a lot of emphasis on planting trees and sort of helping floodplains and drainage and flooding, which I think is really important, don't get me wrong. But around here, I've got the coastal pastures, which, to be quite honest, don't really grow anything from June, July through to the end of August. And I sort of feel these coastal pastures are getting a little bit left behind on the focus. So I feel if the AONB can help us sort of raise that profile a little bit, especially with the new countryside stewardship coming, the elms coming in, I feel we shouldn't underestimate these pastures. So sort of nudge in the right direction there would be helpful.
Okay. Blackberry Camp is an Iron Age hill fort. It's one of 6 that can be found in the East Devon Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty. It's very, very popular with visitors, particularly at bluebell time, when people come from miles and miles just to see them in flower. It's also a site where we've done experiential learning with local schools as part of a heritage-based project. We chose bats as some of our Colchester Declaration species because of their connection with farmland, and East Devon is very special. It's hedgerows, it's a mosaic of small fields, copses and woodland. So woodland edges, hedges, all ideal for bats to commute around the countryside. And then unimproved grassland is insect rich, and so if we can recreate unimproved grassland, then that's adding to the natural capital of the area and boosting the biodiversity as well. We've dropped down now. We're in the valley below Blackberry Camp, and we've come to a little farm. We're going to meet John Phillips, the landowner. We're down here because 3 of our Colchester Declaration species are bats. That's greater horseshoe bats, grey long-eared bats and Bechstein bats, and we've been doing lots down here, and it's a good place to see just how good a habitat, or the habitat needs for those 3 species. So John, I know Craig, our grey long-eared bat advisor, has been out to see you at Little Farm, but I know before that you've done quite a lot of work for greater horseshoe bats. I'm just wondering if you could tell us the sort of things you've done.
Well, what we did, having decided this was the place where the greater horseshoe bats were located, we built a bank along here. This was previously one big field. There's hedges along the bank. We cleared a pathway through the wood, and we cleared down to the stream at the bottom, so the bats would naturally flow into where this new building is.
And you entered into countryside stewardship, and you manage your meadows for bats as well, I believe?
Yeah, I manage for the bats.
As well as greater horseshoe bats, I know you've got quite a lot of other bats here. Do you know how many you've got?
I think there's 16 species altogether on the list, and we've got 15 of them. So now that they've invented this little device that goes on the end of the phone, it identifies the bats, so you know which bat you've spotted, and you're just standing there collating them as they go through.
This roost is absolutely ideal for greater horseshoe bats because it's away from light and disturbance. It's got superb hedgerows with mature trees in, lots of unimproved grassland, so loads of insects for the bats to feed on. About heaven, so it's not surprising that we've got 16 out of the 17 species of British bats in this valley. John, it's not everybody who welcomes bats onto their land. You've allowed us to build this bat roost. What motivated you to do that?
Well, I looked upon bats as little people because they've got their hands and ears and eyes, and you're right, not many people welcome them. Well, it's not onto their land, it's into their house that people don't like. And so I thought having them away from the house encourages them. And if everybody was encouraged to have them away from the house, more people would be interested in them. Particularly children like listening out for the bats and the different noises they make and become interested in them.
Your grandchildren love it, don't they?
Yeah, they love it, yeah. Because it's a challenge as to who can hear the most bats in a night.
A competition.
A competition.
Fantastic.
So from Blackberry Camp, we're going to take you along the plateau tops to the top of the Roncombe Valley and look at the spectacular views down the valley towards the coast. And then on to Sidmouth, further west, to join the River Otter at Budleigh Salterton. So we're here at Budleigh Salterton. We're talking to Sam Bridgewater, the Head of Wildlife and Conservation at Clinton Devon Estates, about the Lower Otter Restoration Project. So, Sam, hi. We're here on the River Otter at Budleigh Salterton. Can you tell me a bit about what's going on here? Is it right to think we're going back in time?
Yes, we hope so. So, this is a lovely valley, and a project that we're hoping to progress is the Lower Otter Restoration Project, which is about trying to adapt the valley to climate change. So it's a beautiful valley, but it's not natural, and there's lots and lots of modifications that have been done over the centuries. And the river is now canalised. There's a large embankment that was done 200 years ago, and that means that the river can't breathe as it once did. And there's all sorts of other infrastructure there. There's an old tip in the middle of the floodplain, which is not an ideal location. There's a cricket club. And with sea level rise and more stormy events, things are starting to kind of fail, and the embankment will breach, and it almost catastrophically breached a year ago. So what we're trying to do with this project is to accept that reality of climate change and adapt the valley by preemptively breaching the embankment, letting the tide in as it once did 200 years ago, and creating lots of intertidal habitat.
So Sam, that's great. So how long has it taken to get to where you are now, and who's involved, and where's all the funding coming from?
It's been a long journey, so probably about 10 years to get to this point. I've been informed that actually a lot of projects like this take significantly longer. Yeah. So back in 2008 or so, the Clinton Devon Estates commissioned a report to look at the Lower Otter Valley and look at the sort of hydrology and some of the flooding issues that we were facing.
I remember that.
On the basis of that, one of the proposals was well, why don't you think about reconnecting the river to its floodplain and doing what we call a managed realignment. We then had a meeting I joined the estate in 2012 in the autumn, and that winter we had a meeting with lots of different parties, including the National Trust and others, who all said, yeah, that's what you really should be thinking about doing. From that point, we did lots of consultation events, and to find out, I guess, is it technically speaking, can we do it? Environmentally, are we going to get a benefit if we do it? Socially, is it acceptable? And obviously you've got to find the funding for it as well. So if you put all that together, and we are proposing some fairly major landscape scale change. We're going from a pastoral landscape, one of it's green and hedgerows and trees, to one that is intertidal in nature. And this valley is much loved, much visited. This footpath above us is one of the busiest in Devon. And of course people have very strong views, and you want to try and bring society along with you if you can. And so that's what's taken us so long. And then of course you've got to go through the hoops of planning and so on.
And the funding, where have you got the funding from? Because it's a significant amount of money.
It's a significant amount of money. So some of the funding has come from the estate, and one of the reasons why we can do this project where maybe they failed elsewhere is there's a single landowner, so some of these decisions are easier. And when you need to, if you have farming enterprises and tenancies, you can compensate with additional land. Some money is coming from the Environment Agency, so they're our key partner, and they're the leading actually on this scheme, because this is something that they do and it's not really, the estate hasn't done a sort of scheme like this before. And they're interested in this site because of flood defence works they're doing elsewhere. So they have a statutory obligation to protect homes, and there's a lot of works that have been done in Exmouth and Dawlish on the Ex, which is a European site, and through those works it will reduce some habitat there, and they've got to provide compensatory habitat. They tried to do that other places, but it wasn't possible, but they can do that on the Otter. So that's their interest, so they're a funder. And the last funder is European money. So we are funded through Interreg, the France Channel England scheme, and it's a project called Promoting Adaptation to Changing Coasts. And we've teamed up with another valley south of Dieppe in Normandy called the Seine Valley, which is almost uncannily like the River Otter.
Right.
They have a road going across as we do, but theirs is at the mouth, whilst ours is a kilometre upstream. They don't have a municipal dump in the middle of the floodplain. They have a sewage works. They don't have a cricket club. The French aren't renowned for their cricket, but they do have a campsite. And so we're facing similar issues, and we believe there's 70 estuaries either on the north coast of France or the south coast of England that would benefit from an intervention. And the whole purpose of the European funding is to kind of put together all our lessons and create a model so that those who come after us have a sort of ready-made guide about how to do this, and maybe have an easier time than we've had.
There's obviously a vision for the project.
Yeah.
And you've talked a lot about how that process will operate, who will be involved. But what's the, people who are watching can't see the vision, if you like, just by seeing what we've got here. What's the vision? What's the legacy long term, do you think? What are you hoping to see in 30 years' time in this environment?
When we finish this project, I hope it will be a massive legacy for East Devon, really kind of upping the environmental offer. So we don't have much intertidal habitat. A lot of our floodplains and valleys have been drained. So this is kind of going back and creating over 50 hectares of mudflat and salt marsh. These habitats, as you know, are very, very important for wildlife. So once we do the scheme, it will probably take about 5 years for it to develop and everything to reach a new equilibrium. But then we'll be expecting lots of different kind of waders to come in. So you're talking Brent geese or black-tailed godwit and so on. So it should be a fabulous site for wildlife. It will be different, but it will be the more natural habitat for this area. We expect that to bring in more people, possibly in the shoulder months, doing sort of the bird watching. The river will be connected to its floodplain. We expect a lot of the community infrastructure that's currently threatened by climate change to have a future. So the cricket club will have a future at a site that won't flood. The road that is threatened by becoming tidal will be raised and won't be flooded. Likewise, the tip that's currently an environmental liability will be protected. And I hope that if you connect all the dots around East Devon on the coastline, you've got Axe wetlands that are absolutely fantastic. It looks nice here, and it is nice, but it could be so much better, it could be so much bigger. Have this site and add that to the Ex. We've got some really amazing nature here, and I hope hopefully we can add to the East Devon's natural offer.
Yeah, making it greener.
Making it greener.
Yeah. And you have to ask the question, because it's on this river and it's going to be the next part of the field trip, is have beavers got anything to play with it?
Beavers, the estates have been a big fan and big part of the beaver trial. In terms of this scheme, will it make it any better for them? Not really. I mean, they can swim in seawater. They tend not to want to. So there's masses and masses of beaver habitat on the catchment, many tributaries, 20 plus, I don't know what's the length of the Otter.
The Otter, now you're asking. Sorry, I know that.
It's 40 kilometres, say, but there's lots of space for them to go, so they'll just move on. So, of course, and any scheme like this, you do your best to look after the species that are there, so there's lots and lots of kind of protocols. So, if there are beavers here, they'll be encouraged to move out. But yeah.
But they won't tend to come down just because of the brackish nature of the water, presumably.
No, not really. No. Yeah. So they're more of a freshwater species, but say they can, they can go out to sea and swim around the coast, but they don't tend to.
Good stuff. So we stay on the river now and head upstream to Yettington and Otterton to join Jake Chant, Field Officer for Devon Wildlife Trust, and the River Otter Beaver Trial, and local farmer Peter Wasnage. So Jake, we're here at Yettington, just off the River Otter, a little bit away from the main river. Can you just tell us a little bit about the River Otter beaver trial and what it's all about?
Yeah, sure. So beavers have been living on the River Otter since around 2007, 2008. We're not too sure where the animals came from, but what was clear was that by 2014 we had breeding beavers. DEFRA found out about this, were quite keen to trap and remove the animals. Right. But with the local support, we managed to get a partnership with organisations up and running, including local landowners like East Devon Estates and Exeter University, and we managed to persuade Natural England to give us a licence to run a 5-year trial. So in 2015, the River Otter beaver trial started. We wanted to look at the impact that beavers have in lowland England, and Exeter University were really helpful for looking at the data that came out of the trial. In 2020, Professor Richard Brazier produced the Science and Evidence report. It's available online, and that was the end of the trial. Since then, the government have announced that the beavers can stay on the River Otter and spread naturally. Okay. So it's been a really interesting sort of insight into how and what beavers do, and we've all learnt a lot about how we work with landowners to provide space for nature.
Yeah. Okay. So it's been over a year now.
Yeah.
So, but the project, you're still operating effectively in some way, shape or form?
Very much so, yeah. So the Devon Wildlife Trust beaver team consists of Mark Elliott and myself. Mark heads up the beaver project within Devon Wildlife Trust, and I'm the field officer specifically working on the River Otter. And it's my job to monitor the beavers to see what they get up to, and it's also my job to make the transition between not having beavers and having beavers as smooth as possible, because sometimes beavers can frustrate landowners, and it's really important that I'm around to provide advice and support if required.
Okay, and how's that been supported? Because the trial was being funded centrally, if you like, with other support, but now is that still continuing?
So the 5-year trial was core funded by Devon Wildlife Trust and some key supporters. So we did some fundraising through membership and membership appeals through Devon Wildlife Trust supporters, and we also got some external funders to support some of the Exeter University PhD work, for example. Yeah. Now we've come out the other end of the trial, and the government have announced that the beavers can stay in the catchment. Devon Wildlife Trust are receiving some funding from DEFRA to provide this help and support to landowners to step in and manage beavers as and when it's necessary to do so.
Right. So we're beyond the main river here, we're going up a valley on rising ground. Is this typical of some of the sites that you've got across the catchment as a whole? How far are they spreading? Where are they going beyond the main river?
Yeah, so every winter it's my job to do a systematic survey of the river catchment. So I walk as much of the River Otter and the small streams and lakes and ponds as possible to get an idea of the number of beavers. And we know that at the minute we've probably got somewhere in the region of 20 beaver territories within the catchment. At the start of the trial there were 2 beaver territories, so you can see there's been quite a dramatic increase in the last.
Increase. And what's that in numbers?
Well, I can't really talk about numbers of beaver. The beaver population as such is quite hard to say, because you have to do a lot of monitoring, and we'd need a lot more resource to actually get a good idea of how many beavers are in each family group. Yeah. What is easy to do is to pick out the hotspots of feeding activity and to work out potential territories. So that's what we're doing now, and we're clear that there's maybe 18 to 20 beaver territories within the catchment.
With a minimum of 2 beavers in each territory at least.
You'd think so, although sometimes you will get dispersing 2-year-olds setting up their own little patch for a small amount of time. Okay. But lots of the territories are it's about 50-50 split actually between territories on the main river and territories on smaller streams and in lakes close to small streams. Okay. So lots of the small streams within the catchment already have beavers living on them. As we can see behind us, they're very capable of producing new wetlands, so they can shape the environment to give them what they need. So they want deep water because they feel safe in deep water, and they have access to lots of different food if they flood a small area like this. And I think the key thing to say on a small stream like this is that this is work that Professor Richard Brazier has done at Exeter University, and the beaver dams at this location are creating a more flood resilient landscape. So this is really beneficial for the village downstream of this territory, that the village downstream has flooded 5 times in the last 20 years. Yeah. And Exeter University have demonstrated that these beaver dams slow the flow of water, which means that the peak flow going through the village is less after a heavy rainfall event. So that's really great.
Okay, so that's answered another question that I was going to ask, which is, how are the communities taking it? I mean, driving up here, I saw that the river was part canalised as it goes through, which just accelerates flow, doesn't it? It causes some of the issues we've got. But also, it's a changed environment here, and I can imagine in other locations the beavers are having an impact on private property. How is it being responded to within the local community?
So on the whole, I think if you were to sort of do a random survey of people walking up and down the footpath around Otterton perhaps, I think there'd be overwhelmingly positive support, and that's reflected with the ex-university work, again looking at the socio-economic impact of reintroducing beavers, and one of the PhD students assessing how people feel about beavers. So local community-wise, the people that live in the properties around in Otterton and in these small villages downstream of beavers, they're positive, I'd say, on the whole. Most of the landowners I meet, I'm always surprised just how accepting and positive they are about the return of beavers, but obviously you do meet the odd landowner that's less keen to have beavers, and I can understand concerns about what beavers can do, and that's up to me to step in Devon Wildlife Trust to demonstrate that we can, if we need to step in and manage the impacts of beavers.
Peter Austinich, you're responsible for managing quite a bit of the land around here. You have beavers on your particular patch here. What was this like before, and how's it changed, and what does it mean for you?
We did. Probably about 5 years ago, we had beavers move up the stream initially. This was always a low input grassland, so this has always been a sort of high environmental impact anyway. So we initially started with a dam here. To be fair, it's been quite positive, really.
Yeah. And you've managed to accommodate them whilst continuing your normal farming practice here?
Yeah, we have. As the beaver dam's grown, it has gone back up through the valley and affected some of the arable and some of the vegetable cropping fields that we've had. So we have seen the good and the bad of beavers, if you like.
Yeah.
And obviously that has had quite an impact on some of our farming activities. But we've been able to manage that relatively well.
Yeah.
And in the wrong situation, they could be quite problematic.
Sure.
But where we've had them, it's been pretty positive.
So have you lost some of your land to your productive land?
We've had to change our cropping programs on some of our fields. Yes.
Yeah.
Obviously, the water table's risen up, and some of our arable fields have now had to go back to more longer-term pasture ground.
Right.
Luckily, with the topography of our ground here, the total area that's been affected has been relatively small, really. But I can imagine if you were particularly flat, they would have a much greater impact over a much bigger area.
So we're expecting the consultation document, aren't we, which hopefully will influence what systems and mechanisms are put in place. There's also the issue over the status of the animal itself.
Yeah, that's it. So at the moment in Scotland, the beaver is being sort of reintroduced in Scotland, and it's a protected species in Scotland.
Yeah.
So the English government have said, beavers can stay in the River Otter and spread naturally, but that the government consultation will have to deal with the level of protection or any protection that this animal is provided with.
That'll be part of that process.
As a farmer, I'd be very happy for it to stay as we've currently got it at the moment, although I'm particularly happy for them to stay on this site. I think it would be great if they were to not become protected, and then there was the ultimate ability to be able to remove them from an area if there was persistent problems there. Really,
that's part of the challenge, isn't it?
I think so, yes. We've been able to incorporate mid-tier stewardship schemes on this part here with some field corner management and some hay meadows and stuff, and it's worked into the existing environmental schemes very well. Some of the negatives might be coming that some of the field drains from our existing arable fields have now stopped running, so ultimately those will probably be silted up, and probably longer term those won't be viable again, really. So it will be changing the environment for good, there's no doubt about that.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you've enjoyed your virtual field trip across East Devon AONB. We leave you with a view back across the Pebblebed Heaths, England's most recent national nature reserve.